Like that.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله عليه وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه اجمعين اما بعد. Assalamu alaikum everyone. So I'm just going to continue and avoid recapping because I end up spending 15 minutes on the recap and then they'll cover me up text. Otherwise it'll take us a year to get through it. So Imam al-Muhasibi says in the next section ولا تشك من هو أرحم بك إلى من لا يرحمك واستعن بالله تكن من أهل خاصته. قال عبادة بن الصامت رضي الله تعالى عنه أظهر اليأس مما في أيدي الناس فإنه الغنى وإياك والطمع وطلب الحاجات فإنه الفقر وإذا صليت فصل صلاة مودع. So he says, and do not complain about the one who is the most merciful to you in front of someone who does not have mercy on you. And seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you will become one of his special people. Ahli khasat. And then he quotes the famous companion Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that he says, أظهر اليأس مما في أيدي الناس, that display an attitude of despair in what is in the hands of people. أظهر اليأس meaning, so a simple way to put that would be don't have any hope in what other people have, and always and don't covet it. But the wording implies like manifesting an attitude, like it's displaying a certain attitude, displaying a certain a certain sense of carrying yourself in a way that one is always looking to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for one's needs, and to the best of one's ability fulfill one's needs through one's own devices, one's own means, and never kind of looking at what other people have and thinking, oh, if only this person could do this for me, or that person could do that for me. But rather, the best attitude to have is to have almost an air of despair from what people possess, so that there is never an attempt to kind of go to people for one's needs, but rather to always go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide. So he says, display despair from what people's hands possess, because that is contentment, or actually literal translation is that is wealth. فَإِنَّهُ الْغِنَى, that is wealth, that is true wealth, that is true wealthiness. And what that basically means is that doesn't mean you have a lot of money. What that implies is that you have contentment, right? And as you know, there is a hadith attributed to the Prophet that true wealth is the wealth of the heart, or true wealthiness is the wealthiness of the heart, implying contentment, right? وإياك والطمع وطلب الحاجات, and beware of coveting things, kind of always wanting what other people have, and seeking needs from others, because that is true poverty. That is true poverty. وإذا صليت فصلي صلاة مودع, and when you pray, pray as though you are bidding farewell, or pray the way a person would pray if it was their final prayer. So there's a few interconnected things. I think it's all self-explanatory, but I'll share a hadith to the nearest meaning, in which the Prophet ﷺ, is reported to have taken from a group of companions, is reported to have invited them to pledge allegiance to him on a number of good deeds. One of them, which is relevant, is that they would not ask anyone of their needs. They would not seek to fulfill their needs by asking people or asking other people. And the Prophet said, pledge allegiance to me that you will never do this. Right? So, of course, and from the rest of the hadith, you realize that this is something that the Prophet ﷺ kind of did with some people, as if he sought them out, as if there was something about their characteristic that he noticed. So he sought them out and asked them to pledge allegiance on certain characteristics, one of them being that. So other companions then later commented that we've seen that group of people accidentally drop their whip, their horse whip, from their ride. So they're on camelback or they're on horseback, and accidentally their whip has fallen, and they've all insisted on getting down and picking it up themselves, even though they could have easily asked someone else to do them a favor and hand their whip up to them. They so kind of rigorously held on to what they had pledged to the Prophet ﷺ. The point is that this is a value. It doesn't mean that you can never ask other people to help you, right? Because people ask first. Because on the other hand, people are encouraged to help each other. There's great virtue in helping others. Does that make sense? But there needs to be this balance in society between people only seeking help first after following the process of seeking help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, and then going to people upon whom there is an obligation to help them, right? And then to the best of their ability, avoiding, going around just seeking help from anyone and everyone. And of course, in the worst case scenario, doing things like begging in the case of people who are poor. And you get to avoid all sorts of things. You get to avoid things like living beyond your means, borrowing money unnecessarily, becoming dependent upon others, allowing ill feeling to develop inside the hearts of others because of how needy you've become, etc., etc. Right? So this is on the one. This is on the part of a person who has needs, or on the part of fulfilling one's needs. But on the other side, the Prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages that when somebody asks you, don't tell them off. وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in Surah Al-Duha. وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ وَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ. Don't be harsh. Don't be harsh. Don't harshly admonish the yatim. And وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. And the person who asks you of a need, right? Do not tell them off. Do not be harsh towards them. Okay? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages looking after the orphan, encourages spending from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam encourages people to have generosity, and says that whoever fulfills the need of their brother or sister in the dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fulfill their need in the akhirah. Right? Whoever eases off of somebody who owes them money, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ease off of them on the day of judgment. من يسر على معسر يسره الله في الدنيا والآخرة. If someone's borrowed money from you and they come up to you and say, I'm really struggling to pay it back, the the Prophet ﷺ, promises reward if a person then eases off of that person for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of that reward. So on the other hand, on one hand there is kind of there is this emphasis on trying to have istighna, trying to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rely less on people, not to stretch one's hands out with one's needs to people, trust in the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted, has taken responsibility for one's rizq and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells people who have the means to seek out people who don't have the means. Right? So there is there's this verse in Surah Al-Baqarah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, للفقراء المهاجرين الذين أخرجوا في سبيل الله لا يستطيعون ضربا في الأرض. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that people's giving is supposed to be for the poor, like the poor among the muhajirun, the immigrant Sahaba who came from Mecca to Medina, having left everything behind. So they have nothing in Medina. So who in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had been stopped, أحصروا في سبيل الله, so that they weren't able to bring their wealth and their money and their properties with them. لا يستطيعون ضربا في الأرض. Right? They can't travel, they can't freely go wherever they want. Yeah. So they have these obstacles, they have enemies and so forth. But their quality is يحسبهم الجاهل أغنياء من التعفف. The person who doesn't know how dire their circumstance is, right, thinks they are wealthy because they never ask. يحسبهم الجاهل أغنياء من التعفف لا يسألون الناس إلحافا. They never persistently ask people of their need, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. Whatever wealth you spend on these people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it well. Because the thing about spending on these people is that they're not going to publicly ask. You're not going to be publicly spending on them. You're probably going to be knocking on the door in private and giving them a gift or something like that, because you've been observing how they've been struggling and so on. So it's a very, very private deed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds people that when you spend on people like that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it well. Don't ever think that, oh, nobody knows that I just did that deed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it well. And that's contextually relevant because in the earlier verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises both secret giving and public giving. إِن تُبْدُوا الصَّدَقَاتِ فَنِعِمَّا هِيَ وَإِن تُخْفُوهَا وَتُؤْتُوهَا الْفُقَرَاءَ فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Right? If you openly give, meaning if you give in public, people know that you're giving, then that is good. فَنِعِمَّا هِيَ وَإِن تُخْفُوهَا وَتُؤْتُوهَا الْفُقَرَاءَ. But if you hide it and give to the poor, then that is better for you. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises both deeds. But in the case of certain people, it's always going to be private. Right? So people who value their, a sense of personal dignity, who value trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and would rather go hungry. Right? Would rather go hungry than ask, or would rather struggle and suffer than ask. And we're encouraged to seek those people out, because they won't seek you out. Yeah. Society doesn't work if everybody wants to give, but there's thousands of people who unashamedly just keep asking, keep demanding, right? And literally live off of other people's generosity, right? Then that imbalance results in the two things. One, it becomes impossible to assess genuine poverty, right? So you don't know who is genuinely poor. And people who give can never fulfill needs of people who aren't interested in fulfilling their own needs, aren't interested in trying to in avoiding asking and fulfilling their own needs, relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by after having tied their camel, meaning constantly seeking the asbab, the means by which the needs will be fulfilled, with trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the other hand, if the people who have wealth become so annoyed at people who ask that they stop giving, then the genuinely poor suffer the most, right? Because yeah, I mean, among all of the people that beg on the streets and so on, right? There's many whose circumstances are not genuine. Meaning, if they weren't begging, they would be able to find other ways to earn a livelihood. But then there are those who are extremely who have genuine circumstances, who have perhaps mental conditions, who are vulnerable, right? Who have no other needs, who have no family, who have no friends, and so on and so forth. Um, those people get deprived the most, right? Their suffering intensifies even further. So the balance in society is, and what Islam teaches, is that people try their best to practice what the Quran describes as ta'affuf, a kind of chastity from asking. Right? The word ta'affuf comes from the same root as chastity. But here ta'affuf means refraining from asking. Right? On the one hand, as far as they can, and on the other hand, those who give try to seek out people who they can give to. And it's for that reason that it's reported that at one point in the era of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, zakat distributed in Africa struggled to find people who would receive zakat. Right? Circumstances had reached a stage where the kind of statutory zakat, if you like, that has to be distributed, they were struggling to find people who would accept it, because people's attitude was one of, well, to the best of their ability, if they didn't need it, they wouldn't accept it, right? So that's one possible reason, and another reason is that circumstances had become so affluent that there weren't too many zakat recipients around, and probably it's a bit of both. Anyway, so that's from a value point of view. There is, the value of that, the value of not seeking, but it needs to be contrasted with. So this is what happens to human beings. This is what happens. You see somebody who's begging, so you preach that to them. You see somebody who comes to you with their needs, and you see that you counsel them this hadith or these words, and you say, look, it's not good to go and ask for your needs to everyone. And you have no relationship with that person. It's not your son, your daughter, your younger brother, or sister, or somebody you have some sort of authority over. It's just some random person. And you're preaching ta'affuf to them, right? Because they asked you for, I don't know, £10 on the street or on the train, or something like that, right? So this is where the domains have become convoluted. You've trespassed your domain. You've trespassed the domain of the giver into the domain of the poor. That this nasiha is when people have needs, and it's to those people. It's not for the people who are giving. The nasiha for the people who are giving is to always try to give, and to not turn people down, to not make people feel bad when they ask you for your needs. So therefore, giving alone is an act of virtue, a great act of virtue, right, for which a person is rewarded. Giving sadaqah is a great reward. Alleviating the difficulty of people is a great reward. And we are told not to destroy our sadaqah by reminding a person of the good that we did for them. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى. Right? كالذي ينفق ماله رئاء الناس. I'll stop there, right? So, all believers, do not destroy your giving, do not destroy your charity, right? بالمن والأذى, by reminding people of your favor upon them, and by causing them harm. So causing them harm. So for example, you expect favors back. You've given somebody some help. Now you expect them to go and do your shopping. You expect them to listen to you. You expect them to pick up your phone whenever you call them, right? So this is man and other. You constantly remind them. So this is how you repay me. This is your gratitude. I did this for you. I did that for you. I got you a job. I gave you money when you needed it. I lent you that money. You're now in a good situation because when you were struggling, I gave you a loan, right? And now you don't even pick up my phone, right? So this is man, and the Quran tells us that this destroys the reward of sadaqah. Right? So لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى كالذي ينفق ماله رئاء الناس. And the verse then it says that the kind of people who do that, meaning don't do that, like the person who spends their money to show off, to show others. Meaning the giving and the charity was never genuine. It was always about appearing generous. This is the quality of people who give not genuinely, not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but to appear generous. And this is why they don't think twice about making somebody feel bad about the fact that they've helped them, or reminding a person of their favor, or even causing them some sort of harm. So the most accurate way to describe the kind of harm done by people who've done you favors is they cause you emotional stress. Right? They are usually the biggest culprits of emotional abuse, emotional blackmailing, things like that. And this is true of everyone who is in a position of providing for or giving to another, right? Is culpable, is at risk of developing the emotional abuser mindset, right? Whether it's a husband, whether it's a father, whether it's an elder sibling who provides for younger siblings, whether it's a donor, whether it's somebody who's giving a £10 note to a beggar. All of these people are at risk of developing the mindset of man and others in the Quranic language, which ultimately, in its worst form, results in various forms of emotional abuse. Right? Because there is nothing more embarrassing, nothing more distressing, nothing that destroys a person's self-esteem more than to be reminded and to be pressured because of the fact by the person who's done you a favor. Right? It's really, really awful. Right? So if you unpack this value, there's a lot behind it. So, and at the end, the spiritual value, the underlying spiritual value that these lines are trying to encourage is reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. The best way to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our needs, right? And this is, he says that if you seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you become his special help. The way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that was whenever a matter was a matter of concern for him, he would hasten to prayer. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا حزبه أمر فزع إلى الصلاة. Something comes up, it's a matter of concern, there is a need, there is an issue that he's struggling to deal with, he would hasten to prayer. So it's like the way if we have a conflict, if we have somebody that we share our stresses with and we share our concerns with, the way if something happened, we rush to their door and almost in a panic phone them. This is how the Prophet ﷺ is described. Faza'a ila salah implies a kind of an anxious rush to prayer. Right? And this is what he taught the Sahaba radiallahu anhu ajma'in, to the extent that some of the Sahaba were known to pray 2 rakats even if they needed a new shoelace. Like they tie it in with 2 rakats of salah and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The point is that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, we declare it every day. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. So it's about conforming to our own declaration. Right? You only we seek help from. So that is the underlying value. Now, since salah is one of the most powerful ways to seek one's needs, the last line in this paragraph is that when you pray as if it is your farewell prayer. It is your last prayer, because it is that kind of prayer that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to, right? It is that kind of prayer that will ultimately fulfill your needs. And if you don't actually get your needs fulfilled, right? You pray for everything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. but you ask for trivial things. And this is actually discouraged by the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ discouraged asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for triviality. Oh Allah, I need a new computer, can you sort it out? Right? Things like that. There's like, so because when you go into the specifics of what you need, all right, you could be asking for things that actually are harmful to you, that actually you perhaps don't need, that actually you're fine with getting a month down the line. There's probably another need that is greater that you should be thinking about now, but it's kind of it's somehow lost in your mind. You've not thought about it, right? You might have a need that's to do with your children's education or somebody's health or something really, really important. In fact, the greatest need for you to be concerned about right now could be a donation to the local masjid because the masjid is struggling for something, right? We don't know. So therefore, our du'as, when it comes to our needs, unless it's something really, really desperate, should be generally that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfills our needs. So if you have a particular need, rather than go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and specifically ask for that thing, it is better to say, Ya Qadi al-Hajat, Ikhti Hajat. Oh Allah, the one who fulfills needs, fulfill my needs. Okay? Specific things that, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did ask for, because generally these are things that that everybody wants to overcome, are things like stresses and anxieties. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's one dua in which the Prophet asked for a few specific things, and you can then look at other sunnah du'as to see examples of what kind of things the Prophet ﷺ asked for in terms of kind of specifics, right? So it says, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal hazan. Oh Allah, I seek refuge, I seek your protection from ham and hazan, from sorrow and grief. Right? Wa a'udhu bika min al-ajzi wal kasal, and I seek refuge in you from a state in which I become paralyzed. I become completely unable to do things. And I think that's how people who are depressed feel, right? A kind of paralyzing inability to get things done, right? So in the Prophet ﷺ's words, he describes it as ajz. Ajz actually literally implies inability. It just means inability, being not able to get something done that you need to do, right? And then a less extreme form of that is laziness. So the Prophet ﷺ says, and I seek your protection from inability, or not disability in terms of a physical disability, but inability. And I seek your protection from laziness. وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنَ الْجُبْنِ وَالْبُخْلِ. And I seek your protection from miserliness, and from lacking courage. Right? Yeah. And then وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ غَلَبَةِ الدَّيْنِ وَقَهْرِ الرِّجَالِ. And I seek your protection from being overcome by debt and from being subdued by other people. Right? And qahr al-rijal is like, in really, really straightforward, simple kind of street terms, is basically, from being bullied. Basically, right? In the simplest of terms, it's when other people's to become a victim of other people's oppression. Okay? So these are things. So, for example, debt is an interesting example, right? That's quite specific. I think out of all of these, relief from debt is a specific one. But it's not that specific in that it's something that everybody wants release from, right? So perhaps ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah helps one overcome debts, but not necessarily a particular one, right? And so on. So again, one can ask for specifics, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is described as preferring general du'as, right? And not bothering with anything else. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يحب الجوامع من الأدعية ويدع ما سوى ذلك. The Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم used to prefer general comprehensive du'as, right? And used to leave others, leave all others. And this is why all of the wordings of du'as in the Sunnah you will find tend to be general terms. So again, if we were to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through prayer, then that prayer needs to be it needs to be a really good one, right? Because normally how generally we tend to pray, i.e. the prayer of a person who is just trying to discharge their duty and get the Fajr out of the way and the Dhuhr out of the way and the Asr, Maghrib and Isha out of the way because it's an obligation. That's not usually the kind of prayer that gets one's needs fulfilled, and it's not the kind of prayer that protects a person from sin and obscenity. Because the Quran tells us, Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Salah prohibits from committing obscene acts and committing sins, right? But for many people, their salah doesn't do that, and that's because the salah is weak. And a description of a strong salah is pray as though it is your last prayer. This is what the Prophet ﷺ encouraged. Okay. On that note, this weekend is Awakening the Prayer. So it is our specific course on khushu'. You know, I did not time the reading so that we came to that particular line today. It just came up. So this weekend is Awakening the Prayer, which is specifically about khushu'. Okay. واعلم أنك لن تجد طعم الإيمان حتى تؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره. And know that you will not experience the taste of Iman until you believe in Qadr. I struggle to translate that, so I'm not going to translate it. Until you believe in Qadr, the good of it and the bad of it. Okay? So you all know what that means, right? You all know what Qadr is. So people usually translate it as predestiny and fate and etc. etc. But every time people think of it in those terms, they always ask a question about free will. It has to come up, right? So when we talk about predestiny and fate and so on, we're not speaking about it in such absolute terms that it overrules our free will. Okay? Yeah. So the simple way to understand it is that ultimately everything is decreed by Allah. Everything. So that is the general rule. The general rule is Inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu biqadr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that everything is by qadr. We've created everything by a decree, meaning it was all previously known. Right? It was all previously known and it was decreed. So there is the famous hadith or Sahih hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created 50,000 years before creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the pen and then commanded it to write down everything that would happen until the end of time. Right? So this is what is whenever we use the phrase "it's written," right? Or it's been written in our destiny or something like that. That's what's being implied. The story of the pen and this moment at some point in history where the pen wrote down everything that would happen. But that is a preemptive record, right, of everything that will happen. And for the most part, it does result in probably the majority of the lives of creation and the experience of creation being predestined. Because most of your life you don't control. Right? Most of your life you don't control. The biggest things in your life you don't control. You don't control where you have no say in where you're born. You've got no say in where you're going to die. You just don't know, right? You had no say in who you were born to. You were going to be born to, what circumstances, what status you were going to be born to and in, right? You have very little say about things like what your health is going to be in the future, right? What your reputation is going to be like in the future, yeah. Whether you'll be able to hold your dignity or not, or whether some unpredictable circumstance is going to challenge you in such a way that your dignity is compromised, right, and your good name is compromised. These are all things that we just don't know. Tests that life throws at us are really, really big moments in our lives. These tests of life, right, are often things that are not in our control. Because if we could control things, then we wouldn't allow ourselves to face those lessons and face those difficulties. Um, Deaths of those around us, right, are things that we do not control. The deaths or the sicknesses and the trials and tribulations of those around us, which then affect us because we then have to help them, right? These things we don't control. Um, uh, Natural calamities and disasters we don't control. So the big stuff in our lives we don't control. So yes, in that sense, you know, the major parts of our life, right, are completely predestined. However, there are parts of our life that, in a specific way, fall within our circle of choice, influence, and control. Right? What that control means theologically is a discussion I don't want to have, but you know what? The extent of our control and how that control works and how things that we appear to have control over. So me lifting this pen is apparently me controlling this pen, right, and me writing with it. But how we marry that with our understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's omnipotence, Allah being all powerful and in full control of everything, is a theological discussion, right? It's something to do with us being controlled and having the ability to exercise our free will, but without that in any way compromising Allah's control, right? And therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power and Allah's control is simultaneous with everything, without which nothing would work. It's almost like saying the way if there's no electricity, then these lights don't work, right? All the electrical devices in this building don't work if electrical power isn't powering them. So it's like we do have free will and we do get to exercise our free will, but it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qudra, simultaneous qudra, right, that powered everything. Why? Because in its absence, nothing could work. Like in the absence of the electrical power running through these circuits, nothing electrical can work. Even though you can bash away at your buttons, but if there's no battery, the battery's dead. Yeah, you have free will, but it doesn't matter anymore. Okay, because nothing's powering it. So I actually had to teach this yesterday. So I'll summarize the whole question of qadr in simple terms. And we'll talk about the consequence of qadr through a couple of ahadith. I often get surprised at how often people want to ask this question, which is why I'm going to explain it. Right? I almost lost over it in the course I was teaching yesterday, and they went, qadr, free will. Can we talk about that, please? We're struggling with it. So I like to explain it in terms of absolutes. Okay? So something that is absolutely articulated in the Quran, meaning it's articulated in clear terms, right? Becomes, it's a given, right? It's like it's an assumption that we can take for granted in life, right? Sometimes these things or these categoric realities expressed in the Quran can appear contradictory because of our inability to rationalize them. Does that make sense? The two things shouldn't be mixed. The fact and our rationalizing of the fact are two separate things. Our ability to rationalize something or our inability to rationalize something does not change or impact the reality of that thing. That's a principle that we must understand, and it affects us like, think of this as an important part of our worldview as Muslims, because there are whole groups of Muslims that have deviated away from Islam just because they didn't stick to this basic principle. They couldn't differentiate between what is categorically mentioned in divine scripture and their ability to rationalize or their inability to rationalize. Okay? And it continues to be a problem. Right? So scientists, there are in the scientific community, there is this idea among a group of them that as human beings, understanding and rationalization of creation evolves, so does God evolve with it. So as though God, the, the creative power behind everything, is subject to how his creative power is understood by mankind. So that is how human rationality can be so deluded. I mean, we can delude ourselves about the way we understand something that we actually are willing to ignore facts. Right? So that's an important aspect of our worldview. That your ability to rationalize something, your ability to explain something, understand something in clear rational terms in your mind is secondary to whether or not that thing is a fact. Does that make sense? So now let's go back to Qadr. So the Quran tells us very, very clearly that, like I mentioned in that verse in, it's in Surah Al-Qamar, right? That says, "Inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu bi-qadar." Right? Everything has been created by Qadar, meaning everything is created in measure. Qadar governs everything, right? So that's one fact. The other fact is the Quran tells us Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed mankind two ways. Right? The way of right, the way of wrong, the way of light, the way of darkness, and leaves mankind to choose which of them they will take. Right? And then mankind chooses one or the other, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then establishes clearly the process of reward and punishment for the choices that people make. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then argues that it is proper that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards people for their good deeds and punishes people for their bad deeds. Does that make sense? Now, if mankind was somehow forced by some sort of predestiny, right, to be good or to be bad, okay, then it would not be just for them to be rewarded or punished for it. Right? In fact, the only just thing to do would be for everybody to be rewarded equally, because nobody had a choice. Does that make sense? And for the world to just play out as some sort of divine, exercise, some sort of exercise of divine will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just wanted, it's like his own personal reality show. Yeah? So, but that's not what we learn from the Quran. The Quran is very, very clear and about the fact that, and categorical about the fact that mankind has choice. Now the question is, okay, how do you reconcile it? First, we establish the fact, then we look at how we reconcile. And because sometimes reconciling things that are apparently complicated and contradictory is subject to how individuals understand it, as well as subject to multiple ways of reconciling, you end up with different explanations. None of those explanations change the fact. I have to be clear about that. Even when Muslims discuss matters of theology, okay? So for example, another example is something that I just said before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that we have free will, right? But that means I have the free will to, and I know it. Like if me picking up this pen is an evil deed, and I've very deliberately, I've done this, right? Like if I was now stabbing somebody in the eye with that, and I'm doing it deliberately and exercising my free will, and that is an evil thing to do, right? An act that is causing somebody pain and suffering and causing them damage, etc., etc. But I'm choosing to do it again and again and again, right? But in that moment, I know very, very clearly that I am exercising my free will, right? But then Allah says in the Quran, "Wallahu khalaqakum wa ma ta'malun." Allah created you and what you do. Allah created you and what you do. Meaning Allah created this action of me stabbing this person in the eye. Right? So I'm now stuck with two clear facts. One, it was my action, it was my choice to commit this heinous act. But on the other hand, Allah is declaring that He created me and my actions. Somehow, because we believe in the truth of the Quran, somehow both of these things have to be true. Right? When it comes to theology, so theology then is simply about how we explain the truth of both, how we reconcile the two and find a plausible explanation for it. Does that make sense? Yeah? The fact is fact. So exactly in exactly the same way. Qadr is true. The fact that things are predestined is true. The fact that we have free choice is true. How do you reconcile is a secondary question. And so one way of reconciling it is to say that Qadr is simply that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything that knew everything that we would do and wrote down everything that we would do before we did them. But by its very nature, knowing does not influence the act. It does not influence the free choice. So Allah's pre-knowledge is simply the manifestation of the power of Allah's knowledge. Allah's omniscience. Allah is omniscient. He knows everything to the ultimate detail, to infinite detail, right? And that means He knows the future to infinite detail. And if Allah chooses to write that down, His exact knowledge of the future, then that's how things are going to unfold. But that doesn't mean that in your moment and in my moment, in the present, I don't get to choose what I do. Does that make sense? The same is also true of things that are contingent. And it's contingent because the Quran and the Sunnah tell us it's contingent. So for example, there is a hadith that tells us that dua changes qadr. That dua changes fate. Right? So if the hadith is authentic, we accept that dua changes fate. Right? But we also accept qadr and that things are pre-written. So the fact doesn't change it. What we are now challenged with is how to reconcile, which is what theologians then do. They try to reconcile the two facts. Right? If reconciliation isn't possible, it's impossible to figure out how, and both are equally powerful evidences, they're equally strong evidence, I mean both are clear verses of the Quran, then you have to just say, well, we don't know how to reconcile it, but they're true. If one scriptural source is stronger than the other, then you have to say, in that case, we favor the stronger scriptural source over the weaker scriptural source. But that is after exerting all of our efforts to try to reconcile. But that still, actually, in reality, doesn't change the fact. Meaning, it could still be that the weakest scriptural source is true, that it's still factually true. But we've had, in our inability to rationalize it, we've had to come up with an alternative way to reconcile, which is to say, well, if the hadith seems to be contradicting the Quran, then we're going to go with the Quran. But that contradiction doesn't have to be true. It just means that we haven't been able to figure it out. We've not been able to work out how to reconcile it. Does that make sense? So, how ulama reconcile the fact that dua changes qadr is to say that there are two layers to qadr. There is a layer that is mu'allaq, that is contingent, and a layer that is final. And that there are certain things that Allah, in His pre-knowledge, has written as contingent. So at a certain point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wrote that on this date, Abdullah of son of so and so will make dua that dua will be contingent upon what will finally happen to, say, his son or his daughter or his wealth or his job or whatever it is that he made dua for. And if that dua is accepted, it's possible that 2 or 3 possibilities that were contingent upon certain circumstances, one will become final. Does that make sense? Meaning that can also be written into qadr. Why? Because we're not talking about human knowledge, human beings' ability to comprehend complexity. We're talking about Allah's knowledge and the ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge to comprehend these types of variables and these types of complexity. Okay? The same is true of Allah's power. So when we say, how is it that I am exercising my free will to do something, but then Allah says, He created my actions, right? Again, we have to remember that we're talking about Allah's power, and therefore it's very much possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power simultaneously powers what you and I do. And what we are accountable for in the akhirah is the point at which our exercising of our will to do something becomes irreversible. So there is when I choose to lift that pen, there is a moment, a millisecond, right, in time when my exercising my will to lift this pen becomes irreversible. Meaning, like I won't be retreating back from. It makes sense. I'm actually going to do it, right? That is me exercising my free will. But how does this, something that requires power behind it, it requires ability, energy, it requires coordination, it requires all of these complex ingredients with it. How does it come to be if there isn't a power that is powering it up, a power that is allowing it to happen? That power is the qudra of Allah. That power is the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how does that power in how does that power every individual act of every individual person in every individual moment? Well, it's because it's not your power or my power, it's Allah's power. Allah can, right? Even if we can't make sense of it. All right? What does then qadr mean for us? So let's now try to just contextualize this particular statement. So know that you will not experience the taste of Iman until you believe in qadr, the good of it and the bad of it, right? Means that the good of it and the bad of it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what this means is that you won't experience the taste of Iman until you are absolutely certain that whatever has befallen you was never going to miss you. And whatever has happened to you, it was always going to happen. And whatever hasn't happened to you, meaning something you expected something to happen and it missed you, right? You're standing on the road and this car is hurtling toward you, and you're thinking, that's it, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and then it misses you. And you think, how did that happen? Right? Well, qadr is what? The consequence of qadr is to believe that it was never going to, right? That was never going to happen. And so it is reported from Ubadah ibn Samit radiallahu ta'ala anhu that on his deathbed he said to his son that the words that Al-Muhasibi, Imam Al-Muhasibi just stated, that son, you will never experience the true taste of Iman until you know or you believe that what has befallen you was never going to miss you, and what has missed you was never going to befall you. And then he says that I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that indeed the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created was the pen, and then he ordered it to write. And so the pen said, Lord, what do I write? So he said, write the destinies, or the qadr, the maqadir, right? The destinies of everything, not all people, but of everything until the hour comes, meaning until Qiyamah comes. Right? So that's what the pen did. And that's what is implied by in another hadith, رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجُفَّتِ الصُّحُفُ. I think that hadith is coming up. This whole idea of the pen writing and the ink drying, that's what it means. Right? It's the pen writing things down, and it's what has been written in the sacred tablet, in Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz. And then Ubadah ibn Samit radiallahu anhu continues and says this final thing to his son. He says, son, I've heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say that whoever dies upon anything other than this belief, what he just said, right, then he's not from among me. Then he's not from my ummah. I mean, that belief is fundamental. So as we know, it's one of the articles of, one of the 6 articles of faith. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says that I was behind the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam one day, and he said to me, boy, Abdullah ibn Abbas, as you know, was very young, right, at the time. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, he was 12. Even though so much is attributed to him, he was 12. But he was so intelligent that Umar radiallahu anhu used to take him to meetings that were discussing important matters of state. Right? So, so for some people, young doesn't matter, right? How young you are doesn't matter if they're brilliant. So he says, boy, let me teach you some words. Be mindful of Allah, He will be mindful of you. Yahfadillah, yahfad. Be mindful of Allah and you will find Him in front of you. You will find Him facing you. Right? And when you ask of something, ask Allah. So this is taking us back to some of the other things that Imam Hasibi said. That when you ask, only ask Allah. And when you seek help from Allah. And know that if the ummah, meaning if all people, or if the tribe, or if everybody in the community were to gather together to benefit you in some way, to give you some sort of benefit, then they would not be able to benefit you in any way except that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already written for you. And if they were all together to harm you in some way, they would not be able to harm you in any way except for the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written for you. Except if some sort of harm has been written for you or against you, if you like. And then he says, رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجَفَّتِ الصُّحُفُ. The pens have been lifted, meaning the pens have written what they were supposed to write, and the scripture has dried. جَفَّتِ الصُّحُفُ, or the tablets have dried. And this is the consequence of the idea that the pen has written everything down in the sacred tablet. Right? So what does it mean for us? Number one, it does not change our decision making. It does not change the independence of our decision making. It does not change our free will. It does not tell us not to plan. So last week we spoke about planning, right? And there was a line from Imam al-Muhasibi where he appeared to discourage planning, right? But what he meant by that was to plan in such a way, that you start to have faith in that plan. You start to assume that plan has to happen, right? Otherwise, we know that planning is good, and we also know that you don't half-heartedly plan. Does that make sense? It's like, oh, what's going to happen is going to happen. What's in my qadr is going to happen. So I don't like making concrete plans. All of my plans are half-hearted. But the point is, there are two aspects to planning. One is planning to ensure that when things are done, they're done well. Right? The other is trying to control your life and expecting what you want out of life. And therefore ending up suffering severe disappointment when things don't happen. Does that make sense? So there is planning as a function, as part and parcel of the function of delivering something, of doing something. Okay? Like planning your revision to pass your exam. Like the better an architect plans, the more detailed his drawings are, the better and safer and stronger that building is likely to be. Does that make sense? Right? If a project is planned well, then it is likely to be delivered well. That is not the kind of planning that is being discouraged. What is being discouraged is the kind of planning that creates an expectation that you've overruled your destiny. You understand? And therefore it inevitably results in a lack of acceptance of Allah's decree. So that when things happen, perhaps against those plans, when those plans are not executed as you had wanted them to, or they were completely derailed, you find it extremely difficult to be satisfied with the outcome. Once things have happened, a believer's attitude is to accept and say, قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. Right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed it and He does whatever He wants. Meaning, despite my plans, right, whatever Allah has wanted, whatever Allah has decreed, is what was always going to happen. Do you understand? So there is a line you draw between what happens before the act and then what happens after. What you do before the act has to be under the assumption that that should it happen, should I be able to get what I want, I'm going to get it optimally, right? So I'm going to, I don't know, cook a meal, right? The cooking of the meal is done before the meal is actually cooked. Everything is done, assuming and planning in a so so that the end result is the best that that meal can be, the best that the meal can be to the best of your ability. So I mentioned last week, كتب الله الإحسان على كل شيء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written excellence into everything. So when you slaughter an animal, you have to do it with excellence. No, at that moment you don't start qadar and say, well, it's destined to die anyway. So what difference does it make whether I slaughter it with a sharp knife or a blunt knife? What difference does it make whether I cut or I stab? What difference does it make whether I shoot it or slaughter it, right? No. The Prophet ﷺ teaches us that no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written excellence into everything. So before the act, you strive for excellence, right? But once the consequence of that effort has manifested what is required, a different thing is required, and that is rida bil qada, accepting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree. That in the end, what has ended up happening is what Allah decreed. And it is based on that distinction that Ali radiallahu anhu said that I came to know Allah through the breaking of my resolutions. Meaning I resolved to do something a particular way. I realized how much Allah is in control when things that I absolutely expected to happen a particular way ended up not happening like that. They ended up happening in a different way. I thought I had total control, but they ended up happening a different way. So really, it's about attitude and it's about outlook. It's about worldview, not so much how you allow your belief in qadar to influence influence your actions before they happen. So, you understand? So that's how belief in qadar works. Okay, and then he says. So moving on. Then he says, وَكُنْ بِالْحَقِّ عَامِلًا يَزِدْكَ اللَّهُ نُورًا وَبَصِيرًا. وَكُنْ بِالْحَقِّ عَامِلًا يَزِدْكَ اللَّهُ نُورًا وَبَصِيرًا وَلَا تَكُنْ مِمَّنْ يَأْمُرُ بِهِ وَيَنْهَى عَنْهُ فَيَبُوءَ بِإِثْمِهِ وَيَتَعَرَّضَ لِمَقْتِ رَبِّهِ. قال الله عز وجل: كبر مقتا عند الله أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون. وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: من وعظ ولم يتعظ وزجر ولم ينزجر ونهى ولم ينتهي فهو عند الله من الخائبين. So very quickly, this one again, it's fairly self-explanatory. So and act according to the truth. وَكُنْ بِالْحَقِّ, act according to the haqq, basically, the truth, which can mean lots of things. يَزِدْكَ اللَّهُ, if you do that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you in light and insight. نُورًا وَبَصِيرًا. وَلَا تَكُنْ مِمَّنْ يَأْمُرُ بِهِ وَيَنْهَى عَنْهُ. Don't be like the person who commands that things are done according to the truth. Things are done according to haqq, but personally distances themselves from it, meaning they don't practice what they preach, and therefore ends up returning with sin, meaning their sin is that they did not practice what they preach. Okay. وَيَتَعَرَّضَ لِمَقْتِ رَبِّهِ, and therefore face the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then to prove that point, he quotes the verse, كَبُرَ مَقْتًا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَن تَقُولُوا مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. It is a great displeasure to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you say what you do not do, that you preach what you do not practice. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever admonishes but does not take heed himself, or whoever وَزَجَرَ وَلَمْ يَنْزَجِرْ, whoever rebukes others, meaning tells other people off for doing bad, but does not take heed of that rebuke themselves. وَنَهَى وَلَمْ يَنْتَهِ, prohibits other people from doing something, but does not prohibit themselves. فَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنَ الْخَائِبِينَ. Then such a person in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is from among the losers. So this particular narration, although quoted as a hadith, the muhaqqiq, Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Qudda, who researched all of the narrations, says that I did not find this particular translation. But most of its meaning is true, because the Quran expresses Allah's displeasure of people who do not practice what they preach. So that much is very, very clear. However, there's one important clarification that some of my teachers made to us that's important. That one should not um, refrain from giving good counsel and good advice to other people because they feel that their personal action or their personal application of what they are saying isn't perfect. So because my prayer isn't perfect, I don't tell anyone to pray. Because my sincerity isn't perfect, I don't encourage other people to be sincere. Because my charity isn't perfect, I don't think my charity is perfect, I don't encourage other people to give charity. That is the wrong attitude. The right attitude is that we consider each to be a separate good deed. A deen nasiha, as you know, religion is nasiha. Religion is giving good counsel to others. So we give good counsel sincerely to other people, wanting the best for them as an independent good deed. With that, we commit and resolve to acting upon the good that the deen advises us to do in our own lives. Does that make sense? Yes? What is clearly prohibited and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly dislikes is when people counsel others and they have absolutely no intention to act according to it themselves. Does that make sense? So it's a fallacy to think that I'm only going to advise other people to do good if I am perfectly doing that good myself. Right? But rather, one should advise other people to do good and remain committed to doing that good themselves. Okay? And one should not, and obviously one should never advise others and admonish others from with an attitude of criticism, with an attitude of belittlement, and so on. Right? So therefore, I guess it's worse if you're not giving people sincere counsel, but you're telling them off and you don't practice it yourself. Right? So, so that kind of becomes a kind of hypocritical. Right? So therefore, the best thing to do is to always make sure that a person's good counsel follows the Quran's guidance, which is ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. Call to the way of your Lord with wisdom, with beautiful counsel, beautiful counsel, good words, nice words, right? And if there's any comeback, if somebody pushes back and says, who do you think you are? How dare you come and talk to me like that? وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. And you always respond in a way that is more beautiful. Meaning you don't respond in kind, but in a better way, right? And that's the best way. Meaning, like resorting to never ever tell off someone you don't have authority over. That's a golden rule anyway. You want to tell your children, it's not always a good idea to tell your children off, but at least you have authority over them. And sometimes it's necessary to do that, right? But if you have no authority over someone and you go around rebuking them, I'm sorry, but it's never, ever going to work. There's always going to be a backlash. And if you get punched in the face, then you probably deserve it. Anyway, we'll stop there. Jazakumullah khairan. Those of you who must go can go. If you have any questions, you can ask them. Yes.
If you're in a vulnerable security, people keep complaining to you about the Imam. Right. Well, one of my departments is they're both of that way. They weren't saying to me, go to him and get it fixed. They were just complaining.
Yeah.
So I got angry with one.